The Z5 II was announced. I have not used the camera, so keep that in mind. If you want to watch this video or not, it's just going to be me talking about specs and comparing it to the original, which I've used for many years now. Overall, not a bad camera. I've gotten this to a point where it works how I want. Reliable for what I do, in that case, anime conventions, going there, taking photos. Usually use this 40mm f2 lens right now on the Z5. It works. Nikon, whatever you want to be called. Nikon has a convenient spot on their page for the Z5 II going over different information. So we'll start with this. Backside illuminated CMOS sensor compared to the standard one. That should be a nice benefit with that faster sensor. It's not ideal, it's not perfect, it's not the fastest thing ever for the new Z5 II, but it is definitely improvement for original Z5 users. Get a newer processor, faster, good, better, all that cool stuff. Video is also a large improvement. In this case, we're going 4K 30 full frame, 4K 60 with a 1.5x crop, and with the original Z5 that I have definitely noticed with 4K is the 1.7x crop. So that just gives you a good comparison of rolling shutter performance. They had to do a huge crop on the original Z5 to make it work at 4K. Another mix of negative and positive with the Z5 II is that it has a 125-minute recording limit per clip. Why is there a limit at all? I don't understand it, but with the original Z5, it's around 30 minutes. So that's an improvement, but still go all the way. If someone wants to do a podcast or something, they're going to have to deal with that, and that's not cool. Another nice improvement with video, UVC, which is a easy way to connect a camera to a computer and get some type of webcam functionality out of it. Great improvement there, assuming it works well. If you do standard landscape photography or basically any type of photography where you just want to have the camera in landscape orientation, that's going to be a downgrade in my opinion in some ways. The biggest improvement most likely is going to be with autofocus. Again, I have not tried the camera. I don't know if I will be able to try it, but clearly Nikon has improved the autofocus performance of their cameras, and this one has the improvements. So if you use the original Z5, it's going to be a clear upgrade. Another clear upgrade is going to be in frames per second in photography mode. They mentioned 14 frames per second in RAW on Nikon's website. With the original Z5 4.5, both cameras do have sensor-based stabilization, but they did improve on it with the Z5 II. On the periphery, you can use focus-based VR up to 6 stops. That's a nice feature. I assume it will improve things. I have noticed various quirks, and the way that I've got around it is I have the camera set up with different focus modes using face detect, having a minimum shutter speed of like 1/200th of a second, which obviously feels pretty high and unnecessary, but that's one of the ways that I've dealt with this camera and made it function as well as possible, and that has helped in my opinion. So if I go to a convention, have it set up in face detect, have that higher shutter speed minimum in aperture priority with the 40mm f2 lens, something like that, it works well. I get a lot of good photos out of it. So maybe that could potentially relate to the VR system on the sensor, and then maybe this new one with the focus point based VR kind of negates that issue. Who knows? Again, I haven't used the camera, but just speculation on my part. The camera looks extremely similar to the original Z cameras. So we've got the Z5, Z6, and Z7 based on how it's laid out. There are some differences on the front here. Pretty much the same. On the back, the clear difference is the fully articulating screen versus the standard tilt screen on the original Z5. But other than that, they did reposition the I button slightly. Not really sure why they did that, but hey. On the top of the camera, it has the picture control button. So if you're into using JPEGs and you're into having their new image recipes, gives you some quick access to the whole picture control functionality. Not something I probably use much, but apparently you can change the function of that to something else. So it's nice to have an additional button. In my case, I probably would use it for zooming with manual lenses, something like that. The main mode dial is the same as the original. Some people have complained about the ISO functionality on Nikon cameras, and I do understand it. I'm used to it, but you basically are somewhat limited in control. They could change it if they wanted to. I don't know if it is the case in the Z5 II, but basically you have your ISO button you have to use as a toggle to use the two different dials to adjust ISO, or in auto mode, not in auto mode with ISO. You have those options, but some people just want a direct dial to adjust it. That makes sense. Hopefully Nikon eventually adds that in firmware, but it feels unlikely. The ports have been changed compared to the original. You've got the mic and headphone ports, which is the same, but they did swap them, which is actually good. They put the mic port on the top, which should make it easier to see the screen because it flips to the side. HDMI port, they did swap from mini to micro. Not ideal, but hey, whatever. And then they removed the shutter release port, but apparently you can use certain ones from them in the headphone port. Z5 II does have weather resistance, so that's nice. They didn't remove it. Definitely good to see. One side benefit of that fully articulating screen is that you can put it into the back of the camera so you can protect it. Like the original Z5, this Z5 II has 2 SD card slots. This is the format that I prefer, so I think this is great. Potentially lower cost unless you want high-end SD cards, and then you're going to be spending as much as the CF Express. One downside of this is that they still have not added redundant video recording to the 2 card slots. Why they do not add that, I don't know, but as far as I understand it, it's not on any of the Nikon cameras. Taking a look at the technical specifications, gone over quite a bit of this, but in EL15C, it's nice to see they're using the same battery, so it's compatible with a lot of their cameras now. The viewfinder has about the same number of dots. However, in this case, they increase the brightness potentially. I never had any issue with the brightness of the viewfinder in the original Z5, but hey, useful to some people. Still has a mechanical shutter inside, which is good to see. You will still have issues with rolling shutter in electronic shutter mode. This is not an ultra fast readout sensor, but the new Z5 II has a ton of different autofocus modes, definitely a lot more than original Z5. I've been frustrated with the original Z5 in some aspects because they didn't add the feature where you can focus in an area for face detect. I think that would have really improved the original Z5, but they never added it. And considering this is out now, it's not going to happen. Here's an interesting little tidbit of information, assuming their spec sheet is correct. It mentions H.265 HEVC encoding for video with 8 or 10-bit. In this case, I do a ton of videos and quality isn't my main consideration. And I do like to back up my video projects. I use them in the future for different needs, and it's nice to have smaller files because it adds up quickly. It's very expensive with a ton of storage trying to back up huge video projects. So if this is correct, H.265 with 8-bit, those should be pretty reasonably sized video files. So that's great. Related accessories, we've got the MB-N11 power battery pack. So we'll potentially attach a extension grip to the camera. That's great. Usually on this series of camera, Nikon has not been giving you the option to have a better grip, but in this case, it looks like you can. A quick look at what is included with this camera. We've got the Z5 itself, the EL15C battery, the body cap, the rubber eye cup, the camera strap, and a USB cable. So it does not include a battery charger with this camera. That's kind of the way of things these days, but it seems a bit stingy. I know this is a quote-unquote cheaper camera, but it starts at $1,700. You're not going to include a battery charger. Come on, Nikon. I technically got the original Z5 with a kit lens, so it was probably around $1,300 or $1,400, not including tax. At the time, around 2021, so it's been multiple years now. MSRP to MSRP, $1,400 for the original Z5 versus $1,700 for the Z5 II. Does not include a battery charger in the Z5 II. Yeah, there is definitely a price increase. I don't know if it's just the way of things, but at least consider it. Now compared to other options, it might be a good value depending on what your needs are. Here are the cameras that I think are the closest alternatives through the different brands. We got the S5 II, we have the R6 Mark II, and the A7 III, of which personally I would only consider the S5 II or the Z5 new. But if you want to get used cameras, the other two are interesting options. Especially with the Sony A7 III and how long it's been around, you could probably find a relatively cheap one, but I would not pay $1,800 new for that. All the cameras do have sensor shift. All the cameras do have 1/8,000th of a second mechanical shutter. All these cameras do have the SD memory card functionality. In this case, it looks like the second slot for the Sony camera is just UHS 1 instead of UHS 2, so you will have a slowdown on that second card slot. However, the other cameras look to have both UHS 2 slots. Back to HDMI output, if you do want to use that feature, do your research and make sure the functionality of it is going to work for you. There is a thing with HDMI lag, so really check it out, make sure it's going to work out. In this case, just based on the port type, the Panasonic has the best option with the standard HDMI port, and the other ones have the micro. In this case, with the LCD screen, the Sony is still using old standard tilting screen. The Canon, Nikon, and Panasonic have the fully articulating type screen. Looking at the magnification of the electronic viewfinders, the Nikon camera has the best with 0.8x, and also the Sony has the worst amount compared to the other ones with the amount of dots in the electronic viewfinder. So if you really like to use your electronic viewfinder, I do think the Nikon is probably the best option here. Even considering its quirks, the original Z5 has done well for me after I've learned how to use it and make the most out of this camera. But with the Z5 II, clearly this camera is going to be a very, very nice upgrade compared to the original Z5, but you are paying for it. $1,700 MSRP compared to the $1,400 MSRP of the original. Even considering the economic climate of the world and how everything is just getting more and more expensive. As a starter camera, the Z5 II looks really, really good. What do you think of Z5 II? Let me know in the comments, or if there are any other alternatives that I missed. Yeah. Hope you enjoyed the video. Scott Trophy Bonsai. Thanks.